Hi there. Welcome to Lifting Leaders Podcast. I'm Trisha Ryan,
Hi, and I'm Crystal Roberts.
and we're here today to kind of do a little homage to Jack Zenger, who was a wonderful leader and an amazing author and professor, and so many things that were good for leaders from the 80s on.
He was one of the people that really established some of the critical foundational work that a lot of leadership experts spring off of today.
Yes, one of the books that he wrote, one of his early books, was Extraordinary Leaders, and that was almost a textbook for a lot of leaders throughout time. So we are giving him creds, and we are very honored that before we had Lifting Leaders podcast, when we had another podcast, we were lucky enough to have an interview with Jack, and we're going to share a little bit of that interview with you, which took place in February of 2021. And it was quite a day for us because that was the first time I think we ever really interviewed someone totally, in our world, famous.
Yeah.
It was very cool.
It was very cool. And I remember that you actually worked with him early on. Mm-hmm. And so you brought him to us, and we were very excited about that. And he was 89 at the time, and just as spry and smart and just clear. Mm-hmm. It was really fun to have that conversation with him and to experience somebody who has dedicated their entire life to helping advance leadership.
Yes. It was, to me, it was amazing. I knew that he was always an engaging person. I've always found him to be engaging. But what I found fascinating was that at this time when we were still reeling from COVID, right?
Yeah.
And it was just very early in 2021. He was talking about things that were exciting us because it was research that he and Joe Folkman were doing, and about competencies in women versus men. And the way he got engaged in that just amazed me. We might hear a little bit about it today. I think we're going to do snippets of that, correct?
We're going to do, snippets of that. And the whole interview is focused around building trust.
Yeah.
So first, we're going to share a little bit about Jack's bio.
Jack Zenger is the co-founder and chief executive officer of Zenger Folkman, a professional services firm providing consulting and leadership development programs for organizational effectiveness initiatives. Jack is a best-selling author, speaker, and a national columnist for Forbes and Harvard Business Review. With more than 5 decades of experience, Jack is considered a world expert in the field of leadership development and organizational behavior. He is highly esteemed and influential speaker, consultant, and executive coach with the ability to connect with audiences through compelling research and inspiring stories. Zenger Folkman delivers high-impact leadership development and corporate training programs with the goal of helping clients boost employee productivity, strengthen employee commitment, and improve bottom-line profitability. His publications include over 13 books that he has either authored and co-authored, including How to Be Exceptional, Drive Leadership Success by Magnifying Your Strengths, The Extraordinary Leader, followed by The Updated Extraordinary Leader, Turning Good Managers into Great Leaders, and The Inspiring Leader, Unlocking the Secrets of How Extraordinary Leaders Motivate, along with his newest book, Speed, How Leaders Accelerate Successful Execution.
So then we started this podcast similar to the way we still start the podcast, which is asking our guests to tell us a little bit about their story, and they can answer that any way they like.
My story.
Yeah.
My story. Oh boy. my story of my life and my career, or just wherever I want to go. Huh?
Wherever you want to go. Tell us a little about
Okay.
who you are and where you've been. Yeah, we did your bio, so that's all that stuff. But beyond your bio, yeah.
You told me, you told the audience here more than they probably wanted to know. Since I was a very young boy, I have been fascinated by the subject of leadership. So my father was a hospital administrator. So as a young boy, I used to go work at the hospital doing menial tasks like mowing the lawn and filing x-rays and doing sorts of stuff. And I had a chance to interact with lots of people in the hospital. And one of the things I became very aware of was the leverage that a good manager could have over the success of the area that they were responsible for. So I saw a head nurse who was just an absolutely wonderful leader in what impact she had on that nursing staff, and the pathologist and the person in charge of the record keeping area. So and I had a chance to watch my father, who had been at this hospital and was there for like 25 years, which is unusual for a hospital administrator to be that long in one position. And so as I went to graduate school and went on in my academic studies, I was interested in psychology, but never in the clinical side, never in the pathological kind of side, but really more in the how can you apply these principles to practical business and daily life. And so I've had a varied career in that I was an academic for 2 or 3 years, and then served as an adjunct professor at Stanford in later years. I've had a corporate career where I was a corporate officer and had a chance to see how the world looked from the inside. And then I had a chance to spend most of my career in the external world of consulting, kind of being a supplier or vendor of leadership development to organizations. You could describe that as a very checkered, uncertain career, or you could say, well, he's had a chance to see it from different sides. I've really appreciated the opportunity to kind of see it from different directions. So I'm, as of today, I'm 89 years of age, still not quite sure what I'll be when I grow up, and kind of loving what I do, and finding a lot of excitement in the kind of questions and challenges that the world of leadership development still continues to face. So that tells you more than you probably wanted to hear about my story. Anyway.
Well, before you jump away from that, though, is there any one thing that you've never been asked that you always wanted to answer?
I feel I've had a very fortunate life. I've had the good fortune of working for some companies that never wanted me to do things that were unethical or to cut corners. I've had a chance to be in a variety of careers where I thought I was making a useful contribution. So I feel fortunate, because I know that not all people have had that kind of experience. I believe that this world that we're immersed in terms of how do we help leaders become more effective, I think we're beginning to see better and better answers. In my lifetime, I've certainly witnessed an evolution of thinking about what good leadership consists of. And I think I've seen some real progress in terms of how we're going about, executing it. So I can't think of any specific question that I wish somebody had asked me.
continuing on our interview with Jack Zenger, our next question was about trust. And we asked him, based on all of his research and his experience through the years, what was most important in his view of what leaders should think about or do to not only establish but maintain trust in their organizations.
One of the things I remember very distinctly in my early career was meeting a pretty reputable psychologist who was saying that if you were to draw a model of what creates effective organizations, that you would say that the very basic bedrock, the foundation on which organizations are established is this layer of trust between the people who work with each other. And that when that does not exist, the organization, you can have good communication, you can have all kinds of effective work processes, you can have all kinds of creative product development, you can do a variety of things, but unless there is this rock solid foundation of trust, then the organization is not on a stable footing. And you always need to kind of ensure that that's in place. Our research would indicate that what leaders do that kind of really establishes that trust clearly begins with treating people around them with respect and dignity. There is one fundamental core message that you would hope all leaders could get. It would be that effective leadership has at its heart the ability of the leader to create strong positive feelings with the people who work together, and that it's because they get treated with great respect, and therefore I think there are a lot of little things that leaders do that can do that. I mean, one of my colleagues said he was talking with his son on the way to the airport, and the son, who had just finished schooling his master's degree program, said to him, you know, if there was one thing you think I could do that would really help me to become a better leader, what would it be? And his dad said to him, you know, learn to ask people for feedback. Learn to deliberately seek out feedback from your colleagues. Some people think that that's a sign of weakness, but our research is really clear that it's a sign of strength, and that if you could get people to become more prone to kind of ask for feedback, you can really change their careers, you can change their lives. And that humility that says, I really value what you have to say, I'm interested in what you have to say, I think you've got a useful perspective that I will value and I will gain from. Those are the little things that leaders do that really creates that fundamental foundation of trust.
And then we dug a little deeper into this topic of trust, and we asked Jack what advice would he have for new leaders on how to not lose trust in 30 seconds.
This is a question which I appreciate being asked, because I have a fairly straightforward answer to it, and that is, what one piece of advice would you give to a new manager in a situation? And the advice would include things like, people are going to come to you and ask you questions. And the one piece of advice I would give to you is, don't answer their question immediately. Almost always pause and say, look, chances are you've been thinking about this question a lot longer than I have. So what do you think? And I think that simple reply of, what do you think? What's your opinion? You're closer to this than I am. Has an amazing kind of ripple effect. I mean, first of all, it communicates, I respect you. I think you have a useful point of view that I may not have. I value what you're going to tell me. And I think it begins to help other people know that you don't believe that you have all the answers, and that because you're the manager, you now suddenly have been given this, you've been endowed with this burst of wisdom that surpasses all that they have. And so I think that practice of not instantly answering people's questions, but indeed to kind of always seek what they believe is the right answer. I guess my final observation would be, I don't pretend to be a perfect manager by any means, but I have practiced this one process pretty religiously. And I will tell you that it's prevented me from making a lot of dumb decisions. I mean, I know that because I paused to listen to what they thought, I thought, oh my goodness, I would not have thought of that. I would not have seen that side of the story. I would not have done that. So I think that willingness to kind of always ask other people what they think is probably the one piece of advice that I would give to a new manager about what can you do to not lose the trust of people that you're suddenly being now made the supervisor of. Secondly, I guess it would be the thing I alluded to earlier, and that is to ask for feedback. And I'll tell you this quick little story. So I have a friend, and you may know the name of Kevin Wilde, who for a number of years was the chief learning officer for General Mills. Our company had invited Kevin to speak at one of our leadership conferences, and a couple of days after that event occurred, I get a phone call from him, and he says, "Jack, I'd like to ask a favor of you." Okay, great. He said, "I'm going to give that presentation again, and I'd like you, if you would, to just give me one suggestion about what I could do to make that a better presentation." Nice. Whoa, here's this guy who had been a General Electric, General Mills, chief learning officer, very successful career. Here he is calling me, asking me for a suggestion about how to make a presentation better. Well, it happened that I'd kind of listened to that presentation carefully, and I did have one observation, and so I passed it on. He said, "Hey, thanks very much. That's all I wanted to know. Good to talk to you. Goodbye." And that was the end of the conversation. And I hung the phone up and I said, "Now I know why you have been so successful, because you had the self-confidence, the courage, and also kind of the respect for your colleagues to ask them what one thing." So he clearly wasn't calling me fishing for compliments. I mean, because he said, "I want to have one suggestion for making it better." So he clearly had the objective of getting better. And that just says worlds about his growth mindset, that no matter how good you are, you can get better, and his practice of that. So I think there are some little things that the leaders can learn to do early in their career that gets them off on the right foot. And then there are some things that they can, easily fall into that gets them off on the wrong foot. So I have no idea what you did to kind of lose the trust of the people around you, but you probably can see it in hindsight.
Our next question for Jack was around how to repair trust, whether you've intentionally or unintentionally broken it. So what were the steps, or what were some things that he had advice on how to rebuild trust?
It is true that trust does take time to build, and it is sometimes just one act can kind of seriously wound it. I don't know of any magic elixir that we can prescribed that will kind of undo all that. I think there's nothing like apology and heartfelt saying, "Hey, you know, I was wrong. That was not a good decision I made," and not pretending I'm perfect. I think that helps, and it's refreshing when you see executives who say, "Yeah, that was not a good decision," and we do make mistakes, and that's part of being human and part of being in that position. And but I wish I had a good solution to how you rebuild trust. But I think it's the same things that built trust originally, and so it's good communication, treating people with respect, being a good collaborator, and it's those behaviors that I think in the long run will win. And I think it can be repaired, but there's no question that it's a lot easier to not lose it, not destroy it, than it is to kind of rebuild it when it's been lost.
And we wrapped up our interview by asking him, what are you working on now? And remember, this was 5 years ago.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. So my colleague Joe Folkman and I have been doing some writing and thinking about the issue of women and strategy. So you may know that we've done some research on gender differences in leadership, and what we've found, much to the dismay of some of our male colleagues, is that as you look at the broad range of leadership competencies that we measure, women are statistically significantly better than men on 13 out of the 19 competencies that we measure. They're about a wash on 3 or 4 others. And then there's 1 or 2 that they don't score as well on. And I'm really fascinated by what we could do to kind of help them. And so this gets a little bit back to the thing that I mentioned earlier, and that is that we do know that women's self-confidence seems to be perceived to be lower in their earlier years. The other thing that seems to be lower is the way they are perceived on strategic thinking. And so we are fascinated by what you can do to kind of maybe help women be perceived on that dimension. Because what we know also about women is that as you go up the organizational ladder, that there's a decreasingly small percentage of women. So women CEOs, there's about 3%. As one kind of wag commented, there are more men named John who are CEOs than there are all the women. So why is that? And what is there that, and is this difference in the way they are perceived in terms of strategic thinking, does that get in the way? Because the other thing that our research shows pretty clearly is the biggest difference between those who are elevated to the senior most positions in companies and those who kind of at the middle and lower levels is this strategic thinking kind of attribute. So how do we help women on that one? And so I was having this discussion with a coach, a woman coach, and she had kind of like some of the same observations. And she said that with one of her clients, she said, maybe it would help if you kind of deliberately altered some of your language so that in a management meeting, rather than just simply coming up with a new idea or a new perspective, what if you prefaced it with something like, so how does this thing that we're talking about fit into our overall strategy? How does it fit into our long-term corporate initiatives? Or what are the strategic implications of this decision that we're making? So to deliberately bring into the conversation the fact that she is trying to link what you're doing with strategy. And so she said that she had this client who did that. And about a year later, when she did a repeat 360, guess what had happened? She had gone from being kind of fairly, low in terms of her scores on strategic thinking. Wow, she was now perceived by her peers and colleagues as being very high. She was doing really well on this. And it was nothing more than her kind of deliberately using that language. Is it because women don't use that language as much? And so what we're currently thinking about is how do we help kind of level this playing field and in this one area that may be responsible for women not being elevated to senior positions in the same percentage as they ought to be. Maybe we can help fix that.
Wow. That was quite a listen down memory lane, wasn't it? It was wonderful. I really loved that interview, and I kind of felt like we were home at that time having a conversation with him at a time when we had all been relegated to our houses. He was too. We were looking at him in his little office next to his kitchen or whatever. And he just was a delightful man. And I think it's wonderful that we're able to pull this out in honor of him. I hope that a lot of people listen to this and have similar memories of what a cool guy he was, people who went to his classes and people who were in some of the things that he did in terms of leadership development as a consultant and people who've written or read his books.
Yeah. The impact is far and wide.
Very much so.
Yeah. And a lot, we're so aligned with a lot of what he was talking about as far as building trust and how that's a foundation for any organization. Mm-hmm. And you have to have that. That's the first thing you have to have. And that even when you break trust, that it's important to focus on how do we repair it.
Yes.
And just these are really important concepts, really foundational concepts that really haven't changed over the years.
No, in fact, I think, as an OD practitioner over the years, I did follow Jack and I also read his books. And so one of the things that I did when I learned that he had just passed, I pulled out Extraordinary Leader and I was just kind of taking a look, and I sort of flipped through the pages. I didn't read it, like a whole chapter or anything. But what I did was I stopped in several spots and then read a few paragraphs. And what I found is that it's not any different now.
Yeah.
It was foundational stuff. And those are the kinds of things that we actually lean on when we're doing our work.
Yeah.
So he had a much bigger impact. And when you think about all the leaders out there today who are leaders as a result of learning what he was talking about. And my heart goes out to Joe Folkman as well, because I know they were partners, and I know that they had a very close relationship. Mm-hmm. Jack told us that. And I know that it's hard to lose your partner and your friend, but I want to just...
father. And he was a father too.
That's right.
His daughter did the podcast for him.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought that was so interesting.
Yes. So it's, I think that it's great that we had the chance and that we had this in our archives. Good grief. Thank you, Crystal, for locating them and bringing them to us today.
Yeah.
And, rest in peace, Jack.
Yeah.